Well, the biggest challenge I think that agents have, besides the number one sales mistake, and I'll talk to you about more about that here in a second, but the biggest challenge that an agent has is the fact that they don't consider themselves as a business owner, and instead they see it as an opportunity where there's going to be a little bit of work and a lot of money. And so that's the biggest challenge that you have. And so then once they get involved into it, then they're like, oh my goodness, I hadn't considered what is it that I need to do to be able to generate business.
Yeah.
And that is simply it's to lead generate 1 to 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. So if I was to sit there and coach anybody, I've been doing this for almost 20 years. That's it. No mas. And then, but then how do you generate, leads 1 to 3 hours a day? And that's where agents get, or business people get a little bit, challenged with, because they'll go to one guru and the guru will say do Facebook ads, or another guru will say do YouTube ads, or go knock on doors, or go drive by distressed houses, or whatever the case may be. And instead of looking at what are your strengths, what is it that you are gifted at doing, what is it that you're going to enjoy doing, and so let's look at that first. Then let's align your lead generation strategy based off of what you enjoy doing. So if you're like someone who loves people and networking, then you're going to be different, than somebody who is just cold caller. There are different characteristics. Does cold calling work? Absolutely. Does networking work? Yes. Does YouTube work? Yes. It all works as long as you do it consistently.
Mm.
Oh, and I mentioned the number one sales mistake. The number one sales mistake for all human beings is the pervasive feeling of not being good enough. And so that's really where I started with is the lead generation. But before you get to the lead generation, you have to focus on the belief. Okay, because if you don't believe in yourself, a lot of times that not good enough feeling shows up as my website's not good enough, my knowledge is not good enough, my broker, if you're a real estate agent, is not good enough, whatever the case may be. Or the worst sales mistake is I'm not good enough. So you have got to sit there and you got to focus on that first. And I go through the book on specific steps on how to be good enough, on how, not just like rah, but like ABC. It's a step-by-step guide. Then once you set the foundation of belief, then it's about lead generating 1 to 3 hours a day, 5 days a week.
1 to 3 hours a day. You said 5 days a week.
Yeah,
Let's talk about some of the most effective ways to lead generate, Dan.
sure.
Now, you mentioned cold calling, you mentioned networking, you mentioned YouTube, and of course, Facebook, social media. You know, one of my agents that I worked with before, he was big on door knocking, and he
Yeah,
had a print newsletter he would put together, and he would canvass the whole farming, area that he had, and he would door knock every month. And I remember him. I don't know how effective. Well, I think he was pretty effective. He had a lot of listings in our area. What do you think of door knocking in today's economy and for, 2026? Is this outdated?
no, I think we're looking at it from the wrong viewpoint. I think we're asking the question is outdated? Is it relevant in today's marketplace? That may or may not be relevant, but I know what's more relevant is, are you comfortable doing it? Because if you're not comfortable doing it, then it's the wrong approach. If you are comfortable in doing it and you do it consistently, then it will produce dividends. I guarantee you, if I went and door knocked 1 to 3 hours a day, 5 days a week for the next year, 1 year from the day, I'm going to have a very significant book of business. Regardless of should we be doing this today? Should we be doing this, in 2026 or whatever the case may be? I'm not sure if that's the right perspective. I think it's more of a perspective of, do I like doing this? And if the answer to that is no, then I'm saying it's the wrong way. Okay, but you have to figure out a way that works for you.
I really like the fact that you want to get to know someone before you recommend what type of marketing they do. I've
Absolutely,
never,
yeah.
yeah, I've never heard of that. I think you're right that most, sales gurus or most gurus that teach top producing agents and brokers, I think they are missing that fact. They always say do this or that, but they don't take the individual into consideration. And some people are shy. They don't want to do the door knocking or cold calling. They're more one on one networking and such.
Some people are.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I wouldn't categorize all people,
Yes.
but some people are shy. And so if you're shy, then you've got to sit there and you've got to discover if I'm going to be shy and I am in the lead generation business specializing in investing, or I'm in the lead generation business specializing in real estate sales, or I'm in the lead generation business specializing in whatever it is that your vocation is. Okay. So when you understand that you are in the lead generation business first, the vocation second, then you're able to then sit there and say, well, I have a million different choices of how I can lead generate. But if I want to be successful, if I want to have consistent, predictable income, I don't have the choice of what to do. Like, I don't have the choice to not do anything. Right. So then it goes back into aligning based off of your preferences, based off of your skills, your behavior. And now that's what you're going to do 1 to 3 hours a day, 5 days a week.
Mhm, mhm.
And I got a book over in my other room. It's one of these books right here that I bought years ago about how to do for sale by owners. And the instructor's way was basically like take this book and go beat them over the head with it until they hire you. That was basically the guy's philosophy. And I'm like, first of all, that's not the way I teach for sale by owners. I teach about developing the relationship. Okay, so for sale by owner is very different than an expired. Expired, they're ready to rock and roll today or they're not. You don't need the relationship. For sale by owner, they're going to consider, they're not going to value you and your service in most cases, but they will likely need your services at some point. And so then it's about developing the relationship, which is now, does it work to go and beat them over the head with this? Well, for some, yes, but not for me. For me, it's about developing the relationship and it's about cultivating that relationship so that they think of me when they're ready to hire somebody. All right. So it's the same niche, two different techniques. Which one should you do as an agent? I don't know. That's based of who you are.
Mm, very good. Wonderful. Great advice and techniques and tips, Dan. Where can people find your book, Dan?
It's on all major publishers, Books a Million, Amazon,
Okay.
Barnes and Noble. But if they want to get a direct link to it, then they can go to www.teachtosellbook.com. That's teachtosellbook.com. It's also on Audible, of course. And but when they go to teachtosellbook.com, they'll have access to a $10,000 training course that I go through the 4 pillars of sales that we'll give to them as a bonus.
Oh, I like that. We'll definitely put that in. That's teachtosellbook.com.
That's right.
And if they go there, they will also get a bonus that's worth about $10,000 of techniques, tips, and strategies from you.
Yeah, we used to sell that bundle. It took us several years to create it, and we used to sell it for $10,000. And when we published the book, we decided just to give it away for free.
That's awesome. I love it. And we'll definitely be promoting that link as well as
Thank you.
Amazon.com and the other bookseller resources as well.
Sure.
Now, um, Dan, can you talk about maybe like you mentioned, we went through a lot of strategies for lead generating, cold calling, networking, YouTube, Facebook, door knocking, expired, FISBOs. Can you think of any other um, solid lead generating techniques that you like or that you've seen successful for other people?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do a lot of business that we get from absentee owners. and that would be relevant for your investors and your agents. And we do both. And so just cold calling investors that own multiple properties in my local marketplace. I'm in the DC metropolitan area. So there's a lot of former military that will buy a home here and then relocate, and then they end up not wanting to own it. And so that's a great source of business. Another source of business that we do is we buy homes advertisements on Facebook. Again, dual purpose as a broker and as an investor, so you get the result for both of them. And then we also do where we pay a referral fee at the back end. So those are companies like Upnest or Veterans United or Ojo, OpCity, Realtor.com, those types of things.
Okay.
And so then we're paying the referral fee at the back end of it. And then we also use different platforms like iSpeed to Lead to be able to find investors. There's another one like something Bumblebee or something like that. I forget. I don't use it, but it's out there. You can probably figure out what I'm trying to say there. But ultimately, it's about, I think the question is, traditional sales techniques, do they work or do they not work?
Yeah.
And understanding that, people don't want to be sold to, they want clarity. And so that's the philosophy that I preach is about how can you be able to guide somebody, because today's clients and investors, they have access to the information. They don't need more pressure. They need someone that can actually explain what the information means. So it's first acquiring the opportunity, but then it's also consulting them in a teach yourself philosophy, such that you are helping them to avoid the predictable problems of a transaction moving forward.
Wonderful. Now, Dan, in addition to your book, what other services do you offer um, broker agents, brokerages, so that they can improve their sales?
Yeah. So we do group training, we do one-on-one sales training as well, and it's all built to have a pathway so that if you consider the result is going to be consistent, predictable income. Okay, that's going to be the result. The pathway is going to be teach to sell. Okay, and so the philosophy is to sit there and say, how can we have no broke months? And so we help our agents that we coach through the programs that we've developed over 20 plus years. And now it's amplified with AI and, big data and all this, really cool stuff that's available to us today. And we're able to take an agent and ultimately set them up so they have no broke months. And that's it. That's the one goal. That's it. So then we sit there and we say, well, how do we help somebody have no broke months? It goes back to what I shared with you before. I can't give you a blanket plan, but I can give you 50 blanket plans and then say, here's the one that appeals and applies to you. And we have a survey where we'll go through and we'll say, what's your style, what's your behavior, what's your values, what's your beliefs, what's your perspectives, and we really understand the agent first and then come up with them to guide them.
Wonderful. Are all your trainings done virtually or are they in person? How do you normally like to work?
We do, most of them are done virtually. We do a quarterly event that we host at my home in Clifton, Virginia, and so that's the top mastermind that we offer, and it's typically around 5 to 10 people that will come and stay locally with me, enjoy the ambiance of working together and the relationships of developing relationships with other top-minded people, and so we do that on a quarterly basis.
That's awesome. I love that. What gave you the idea to write the book, Dan?
So once upon a time, I was the owner of a brokerage. And when I was in that role, I had about 150 agents who worked with me and for me. And I would get the same questions over and over again. And so what I discovered was sitting there saying, well, if I'm dealing with the same problems, someone upset about a home inspection, for example, and I understand that they I started asking myself a question sitting there say, well, what if I proactively handle this rather than reactively handled it? Because it's the same problem, just different agent, different clients. And so that's where Teach to Sell was born, was when I recognized that there could be a better way of approaching business so that instead of waiting for something to blow up on you, what if we approach this so that we're being consultative up front? What if we approach this so that we're helping the clients to prevent the predictable problems of the transaction as they move forward through it? And so that's what caused me to come up with the idea and, then brand it as Teach to Sell. And it, really around 20 years of learning, the real estate craft is, I spent about $1 million into my own coaching, webinars, seminars, that I've attended. And I've spent about $1 million into the people that I've led for the same. So it's about $2 million of investment
Wow,
that is documented in Teach to Sell so that the reader can, save themselves a little bit of money and time.
that's awesome. Wonderful. Let me go back to my notes here.
I'll tell you this, the other
Yes.
reason why, yeah, one more thing about writing the book is just really understanding that feast or famine is a consistency problem. So it's not a market problem. And I
Right.
think that goes back to one of your previous questions, like is in 2026, is this appropriate, right? Because what happens is I find that people prospect when they need money, and then they stop prospecting when they get busy
Hmm.
and they discover that their pipeline's empty.
Right. That's
Okay. And that's
exactly
that's
right.
right, right. So
You
so
hit
that's
it
the
right
feast
on
or
the
famine. Right. So it's understanding that say, well, if you want to get away from feast or famine, and if you want to be able to have consistent, predictable income, then teach to sell is the path to be able to get there.
love it. That's fantastic. Dan, what about agents or brokers that have assistants? Do you recommend that they get their assistants involved in the lead generating process to help them and also just to have double the team effort?
It is, but you have to recognize people's strengths appropriately. So a good assistant's going to be focusing on the details. They're going to be focusing on getting things right. They're going to be focused on communication excessively and excessive communication. And so when you understand that that is let's say it's a client care captain, and that's their role. So now, how can that client care captain help me to be able to get more business? It's about exceeding their expectations. Okay, so it goes back into service being, there's five things that an agent does that makes some money. So the five things that an agent does to make the money is to lead generate, to convert the leads to meet with you, to attend the appointments to get hired, to negotiate, and to practice your scripts role play. So in the book, I call that consistent, predictable income time. That's the only five things that make you money. That's a job description of any business owner. So now, what's not on there? Exceeding clients' expectations. Do you need to exceed kind of expectations? Absolutely. But if you're the business owner or you're the leader, it doesn't necessarily have to be you. It should be your staff to be able to provide that, unless you don't have a staff. Okay, so if you're asking me specifically like how the assistants can help, it's by exceeding the client's expectations. So we're communicating with our clients 5 days a week. Okay, and that the agent's communicating with our clients 2 days a week. So that's seven communications. I have the philosophy if a client ever has to call me, we have failed. It means we did not take the time to be able to call them first. So
Mm,
now that's a roundabout way of answering your question. Should the assistant be helping me lead generate? Absolutely. Because when we're given we're given 10 out of 5 star care, now it's easy for me to ask for that referral.
I love it. I love
The,
what you just said. If a client calls me first, then
yeah, I screwed up.
failed.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then I tell that to my staff. I say, listen, if I ever get a phone call from a client, that's an opportunity for us.
Wonderful. Now, you mentioned that the traditional always be closing model no longer works in today's real estate market and industry. Can you talk a little bit about this, Dan?
Yeah, I wouldn't. You should always be closing, but always be closing when the opportunity presents itself. Okay, and so what a lot of agents do, or a lot of people do, is they neglect the communication strategies that are going to create them more business, more opportunity, more listing, more deals, more referrals, right? And so what the communication strategies are is to build rapport and then ask thoughtful questions, deep diving questions, and then listen to the real motivation behind the decision. So if you're taking those three steps, build rapport, and that's called CPI, communication model. So if you're taking the time to build rapport, ask thoughtful questions, and listen to the real motivation behind the decision, and understanding what outcome are you trying to create, Mr. or Mrs. Prospect, and what concerns do you have most? What would cause this opportunity to be worthwhile? What happens if you wait? What happens if you move forward today? And really diving deep into their motivating factors. And what happens is people trust you more because you're not beating them over the head to say, hire me now, hire me now, hire me now. Now, that being said, when the time is appropriate, you do want to ask to get hired, but you should deliver your value up front before you get to that point. If I go on an appointment, I'm only on that appointment to do two things. I'm on that appointment to consult and to get hired. That's it. So that means that before I get to that appointment, I have to have already delivered my value to them. So there's 13 steps. If I book a listing appointment, there's 13 steps in between now and the time we go to the appointment. I'll tell you what some of them are. So it's you send them a Google Calendar invitation with a presumptive close. Linda, we look forward to helping you. You send them a text with a video and you chat in the video. You say, hey, Linda, I look forward to meeting you on Wednesday and taking great care of you. You send them testimonial videos of past clients. And we do 3 emails, we do two additional texts. We send them a pre-listing packet that's printed out, delivered to their doorstep. We're sending them a video that is a little bit longer of an explainer video about how we're going to be able to serve you and why people choose us for our services. And there's an extraordinary amount of information that's shared with them about our services and how we're going to help them before we meet. So then when we meet, there's two things to do: consult, get hired. What some people do is say ABC, right? So if I always be closing, so should I always be closing? No, but I should always be set up to close, which is the final question. In fact, it's the only closed question I ask during the entire consultative process. Everything else is an open question. And for your readers, open question is going to, allow for the participant to fill in the blanks, where a closed question is going to be a yes or a no. So you go through that entire assembly line of cultivating, of having a phone conversation with them up front, of understanding what their concerns are, understanding what they want what their outcomes want to be, understanding why now is the right timing. Then you deliver your value, then you consult them, then you always be closing. So it's the order that I think people get out of sync.
They close them before they even know them and what they can deliver.
That's the thing. And if you're sitting there, you're going to go Glenn Ross on them, then it's gonna push them away, and they're not gonna they're not gonna trust you, and you're gonna do less business.
Mhm, mhm. Yes, you brought up a really good point, Dan, on the movie Gary Glenn Ross, classic, but also, let's face it, a lot of people don't trust salespeople. And that's why
Yeah.
I really like your technique of communication, transparency, putting them at ease, because I think that is so important. And wouldn't you say that the majority of people don't trust people that are selling or that rely on sales for their livelihood?
Yeah, it's teach a sell replaces pitching with leading.
Mm.
It's asking better questions, it's understanding the person's goals, teaching the available options, and then helping them to choose confidently. It's putting yourself as the guide rather than the pitch person. And so when you guide somebody, well, of course you have to first deeply understand who they are, what they want, etc. But then you've got to then be able to walk them down a pathway so they can see their options. Okay, so a seller may have several options. Like sometimes I'll do a distressed seller and they just want to sell quickly. I say, well, you have the option to sell to a local investor. You're going to make around 75% of loan to value, but you'll have a check in your mailbox a week from today. Or you can sell to a national investor. You have 83% of loan to value. It's going to be about 40 days. We can sell it as is, 90% of value, get retail buyers in here, or we can do some improvements and sell it for 100% of value. So I just gave a seller four options there. Now, guess what? As the sales professional, whatever option they choose, I'm still moving the sale forward.
Mhm.
Okay. And so now they say, well, I want option C. Great. Then let's talk about option C. Here's the next steps. And so it's about also not just saying there's only one option. So as a sales professional, when you can sit there and provide a consumer with more than one option, now you're being able to be more of an advocate for them and you're able to lead them rather than pitch.
Mhm. Very nice. Um, what else? Oh, I had another question as well. New agents just got their license. They have a farm in the same area of agents that have been established for 10, 20 years that have, a large staff. What is your advice to be able to compete so that new agents can compete with the established brokerages that have, lots of staff and people working under them?
Well, two things to that. One is if you are a farming agent or if you want to be a farming agent, you've not yet developed your farm, you have the opportunity to create any farm that you want to create. And
Mm,
so do you have to compete against those big dogs? Not necessarily, And so what we would do is we would take a look and say, okay, what's the average turnover? So if there's 100 homes in this community, how many sell each year? Call it seven. And now of those seven, how many have, how many of one or two agents are helping them, right? So when you find that, one or two agents have, 15 or 20% of the marketplace, then there's still 80 to 85% of the marketplace available to you, right? And so maybe that makes good sense. But if you find that there's 50% of the marketplace dominated by one agent, you can still compete, but it's going to take you years to succeed, to get into that. So maybe there's a quicker path. Or you could do them simultaneously where you're saying, well, I live here and if this is my home and this is where I want to, this is where I want to compete, understand, as long as you understand what you're getting into before you get into it, then you say, well, this is going to take me a long time to be able to establish roots in this community. And while I'm establishing roots in this community, I'm going to look elsewhere for other business to be able to, feed me while I wait.
mhm, mhm. Wonderful tips. And I like the fact that you said that you can choose any area as your farm. You don't
We get to
have to
design
be,
our lives.
yeah, you don't have to be obligated to your own neighborhood.
No, no, not at all.
And a lot of agents now, they're bypassing the farm and just going, targeting certain demographics, like seniors who want to downsize, families who want to upsell to a larger home, new homeowners. I mean, those are all targeted groups that are not in a farm area.
Well, that's a niche. When I started in
Yes.
real estate sales, my farm was a niche. And
Okay.
so my farm was a specific type of sale, it was a short sale. And I was able to in 2008, and you go back to the question, is now the right time? Now's always the right time to do business. Sometimes you just have to go against the grain, and sometimes you just have to be able to work harder, to be more creative, whatever the case may be, right? But in one of the hardest economic times of my lifetime, I was able to succeed to an amount that I was able to buy the brokerage I worked for 18 months after I got my license. And I
That's
didn't have a neighborhood farm
incredible.
then. Yeah. So it's just taking a look at what's the opportunity and then leaning into that.
That is incredible, Dan, that you were able that I mean, you just came out of the woodwork just exploding. That's
Well,
amazing.
that may be the way it looks like from the outside, but from the inside, it was a little bit more than that. But I get it.
Yes, wow, that's fantastic. Okay, let me see here. Now, you talk a little bit in your book about the psychology behind why people resist being sold to.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that? And then also wanted to find out if you would ever be willing to do a virtual event with our network and we could, sell your book after and really just um, promote you and try and
Sure.
get some good book sales if you were to um, do a virtual with our network sometime. That would be great.
Yeah, I do them often. I'd be pleased to do that, and we could just set it up whenever works for you. Um, what was the question again? I
Yes,
was
the
paying attention to the
question
second
was
part. Sorry
about,
about that.
oh, yeah, no worry. The psychology behind why people resist being sold to.
Yeah, it's really about it goes back to primitive things. It's like it's a threat. And it's also understanding that, as sales professionals, we've got to understand that everyone perceives the world differently. We gather data through our senses, through our beliefs, our values, and then we create an identity around it. For some, that identity is sometimes it's political, sometimes it's in business. I had the identity as an operating partner of a Keller Williams Realty franchise for 10 years. That was a part of my identity. Sometimes it's being a dad. That's going to be my identity for the rest of my life. And so it's understanding that there's different ways that we approach, decision making process. Okay. And so when we understand that our job is to connect first, to then inquire, ask deep diving questions to discover, and then to be able to guide, right? That transforms the perspective of you're no longer selling. You're no longer a threat. Okay. Because all those things I just mentioned to you about how we design our lives and we create our meaning to our lives. I can't compete against Linda. Were you called Linda as a girl? Yeah.
Yes.
5-year-old Linda. For me, it was Danny. 5-year-old Danny. I've gone for Dan. So in my life, I was Danny till I was 18. I went in the army and I was Rochon for 4 years, and then I became Dan. Okay. Well, that 5-year-old Danny still has a place in Dan. That 5-year-old Linda still has a place in Linda. Okay. So for me to be able to persuade against, that identity that you have, that's near impossible. And that you're going to resist that. We're all going to resist that. You get some cold caller calling you. I do the same thing. So I'm polite to them. I respect them very much, but I'm not going to engage in the conversation when I get a spam call. Okay. I'm going to appreciate that they're doing they're working hard and honor that, but I'm not going to take my time to be a part of that. Okay. But if I thought that that person can provide me with a true value, can actually lead me, can actually guide me. And I'll give you a good example of that. Like if you think back to your childhood, and you think back to your favorite coach, your favorite teacher, your favorite guide, and you can, like if you can really truly remember them and you see them and you hear them and you feel the way that you felt when they believed in you. And then imagine that that person came into the room today and gave you advice, would you follow it? Well, the answer to that is a
Absolutely.
yes. That is teach to sell.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay, that is teach to sell right there, right? Which is very different than a professional where they're again always be closing, right? And so I don't know if it's new to today or if it's always been that way and we're just smarter beings because we have more time on the planet. We're figuring out, well, maybe the approach isn't going to go bang someone over the head until they hire me. Maybe it's about being the guide and being the leader and instead of again, begging them for their business and being salesy, creating an experience that's worth talking about, and staying useful through the transaction and continue sharing your knowledge through the transaction so that, when you're asking for the referral, it's appropriate. When you're asking for the business, it's appropriate.
Hmm. Wonderful. Is there anything that you would like to add, Dan, that perhaps I didn't touch upon that you think it's important for our readers to know?
Yeah, I think that it's important that we understand that you can't control rates, you can't control inventory or the economy or the war overseas or the oil prices or how much it costs you to go get a loaf of bread. Though I know we all would rather be able to control that. You can't control any of that. Okay. But what you can control is how you consistently teach, lead, serve, and follow up. You can control the way that you respond to things. You can control the way that you set yourself up for success. And if I make 20 calls today and 19 of them, hang up on me, I could control the fact that I'm making 20 calls and that one maybe somebody who's ready for my service.
Mhm, mhm.
So it's about focusing on the things you can control. And the conversation in the marketplaces, I've seen this for 20 years. I've seen the conversation be, I wrote my first book, Real Estate Evolution. And when I wrote that book, I remember there was a company that was launching into California. And I don't even remember there was an Australian company. I don't even remember their name, but I remember that they were launching into California and everybody was saying they're putting us out of business. They're putting us out of business. They're putting us that was the conversation. The same way as today, it's like it's Zillow's buying everything up and Keller Williams got bought up by big money and Real is buying Remax and
Yeah,
and and Redfin bought what did Redfin buy? Or Rocket bought Redfin rather, and so you're looking at all these consolidations and the conversation is like, I can't do anything about any of that. Right. That company that was coming into the marketplace in California in 2000 and I think 13 when I wrote my first book, they were out of business before my first book was published.
oh my
So at
goodness.
the beginning of the book, I mentioned them, and then at the end of the book, I mentioned them again. I'm like, yeah, remember that company I told you about 4 chapters ago? They're gone. Don't worry about them. Instead, focus on what you can control. Focus on, how you treat yourself. Focus on your habits. Focus on taking a walk every day. Focus on drinking water. Focus on getting rest. Focus on your relationships. Focus on your spiritualities. Focus on the things that are important to you in your life
Mhm,
and focus on lead generating 1 to 3 hours a day, 5 days a week
mhm, mhm,
instead of having a conversation about all those things that are outside of our control.
mhm, mhm. Dan, you mentioned some important things like your habits, exercise, drinking water. From my years in sales, because of course I'm an agent, but I also do media sales, and I've been in
Sure.
media
Yeah.
sales for, decades. I've noticed that a lot of people, salespeople, get into unhealthy habits because of the high stress of their job and because of the constant rejection and negativity. What do you have? What advice do you have so that people that start in sales can end up having healthy lives and not, be drinking their sorrows away at
Yeah.
6 o'clock every afternoon?
It's a choice.
Okay.
And understanding that you can be at 6 o'clock at the bar today, or you could be at 6 o'clock at the gym. I have an unhealthy habit and I only have a friend. He's taking a break from this, which means I'm taking a break from this. And about once a month or so, I'll go smoke a cigar. Now I have a healthy habit. About 5 days a week, I'll go to the gym. And one day I went to smoke a cigar, and I'm looking around at all the guys in the room. It was all guys, and they were all fat, they were unhealthy, and you could tell that these guys were not, like they weren't taking care of their bodies.
At the
The next
cigar
day I go to the
lounge?
gym. What's
At
Yeah,
the
the
cigar.
cigar lounge.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, at the cigar lounge. And I looked at everyone around. I'm like, man, I'm the healthiest guy in this room. But then the next day I went to the gym and I'm like, oh man, I'm at best average. Okay. So it's like it's my choice. I can spend this afternoon at the cigar lounge or I can spend this afternoon at the gym.
Mm,
All right, that's my choice. And then it's just sitting there saying, it's like, the first conversation I had with my daughter in her life was, listen, I adopted her in Las Vegas, Nevada. We were at the 14th floor of the Aria Hotel. She was 4 days old. And I said to her, I said, sweetie, you can own this hotel when you're adult. You can be sleeping on this doorstep, homeless or anything in between. And I'll always love you, but I hope that you make good choices because the choices that you make create your destiny. The habits that you design are the way that you're going to create your life. Okay. So if you take the habit, no judgment at all. But if you take the habit of, I'm a recovering alcoholic, I've been sober for 21 years. I took that path once upon a time in my
yeah.
life. Okay. So I get it. But then I chose a different path. As a recipient of the outcomes of both paths, I enjoyed this path that I'm on today more than I did that path when I was destructive to myself.
Mhm, mhm. Wonderful. Congratulations on your
Thank you.
sobriety, by the way. That's quite an accomplishment. Dan, it's been such a pleasure to connect with you and to speak about your wonderful new book and Teach to Sell. And anything else that you want to add before I let you go? This has been just such a wonderful, inspirational time with you, and definitely looking forward to having you do a webinar with our
Sure.
network. And we have a lot of powerful brokers in our network too. That way they could be exposed to the book, and also hopefully maybe they can even join us on the webinar. That would be amazing.
I love that. My final thoughts, I just want to say believe in yourself because you deserve it. The biggest obstacle to succeeding is that pervasive feeling I talked to you about earlier about not good enough. And that's a recurring theme that holds many of us back. It's that self-doubt. And it's easy to think negatively. It's easy, especially when you're juggling all the balls, you're getting the rejection, you're multitasking, you have different demands on your time. And it's easy to be able to get into that habit of thinking that you're not good enough. I want your audience to know that you are good enough. And that feeling's got to start within themselves first because no one's going to believe in you until you believe in yourself. And if you want to get hired more often, it's the key to your success.